Check. Hello. Good morning, Luke.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you can hear me? Is my voice clear?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Ah, halo, Pak Deddy.
Hello, Pak Deddy.
Hello.
What time is it, Luke, in Sydney?
It's 1:30 p.m., so just after lunch. So it's selamat siang for us.
Yeah. You're still in the morning, 9:30 a.m.
Yeah, so selamat pagi.
Not having lunch yet. Okay.
Yeah. So
Shall we start this?
yeah,
Like,
I can start at any time. Just let me know when to share my screen, and then I can get started.
Oke, Pak Deddy gimana?
Pak, mulai aja mungkin ya, sambil jalan aja.
Oke, sambil jalan ya. Okay. Let me have this with bahasa Indonesia dan bahasa Inggris untuk semua audiens. Oke ya. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Warm greetings to all participants joining us today through Zoom and YouTube. And welcome to the International Guest Lecture hosted by Urban and Regional Planning at ITSB, Institute Technology Science Bandung, in collaboration with the University of Sydney. And today's session is entitled Co-Planning and Co-Design, Introductory Concepts. And we are honored to have Dr. Lucas Espanyol, Head of Design at Sydney University, as our speaker. But before that, I would like to ask Pak Daddy to introduce Luke to everyone here because you are bestie. Okay, please, Pak Daddy.
Okay, let me share screen first. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so let me introduce Luke as my bestie says Mbak Ida. So Dr. Luke Espanyol is a senior lecturer in design at the University of Sydney, director of the Master of Interaction Design and Electronic Arts, and a member of University Academic Board. Luke hold a PhD in Design, a graduate certificate in Education, and a Master Interaction in Design and Electronic Arts in the University of Sydney, and a Master in Cross-Disciplinary Art and Design at UNSW, a Bachelor in Computer Science at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, and a certificate in negotiation and dispute resolution at Harvard University. Luke practice investigate an intersection of people, culture, and technology that include a range of theoretical and practical angles like design intervention and with vulnerable groups such as First Nation people, refugees, and people in prison. It also includes the meditation of cities and culture through digital technologies across the field of media architecture, digital storytelling, social and cross-cultural interaction, placemaking, urban informatics, and smart cities. Luke has advanced discussion on this field through the numerous engagement with government, industry, museum, and academic institutions worldwide. Luke is a fellow the Social Impact Hub in Australia. So we very lucky that we have a guest lecture from Luke with so many uh, impression. And the most important is Luke is a member of Viking Pacific Viking Society. So, Mbak Ida, I will return to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the brief introductory from Pak Dadi as bestie of Luke. Okay, without further ado, we would like to also congratulations, I think, for new roles in Sydney as a head of department or new director, and all faculty members, student, and guests from this time is held by attendee is from any of other lecturers, especially in introduction of technology and design, also from urban planning and other member from Urban Regional Planning Association probably. And of course, all of you who have registered and joined us today. So the agenda for today's session is opening already done by Padadi, and today the lecture presentation by Dr. Luke will be begin now. Begin now. So without further ado, let us welcome our speaker, Dr. Luke. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Bu Ida, and thank you also, Pak Dadi, for the very kind introduction. And yes, I'm a Viking, and I'm proud of that. So good to be part of the community. I'll share my screen, and I'll get started with my lecture. But I would just like to once again thank you so much for having me today, for giving me the opportunity to speak to all of you and to share some of my knowledge, my skills with all of you. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them at the end of the lecture. So thank you very much. So I'm going to get started with the lecture, which has been advertised. It's going to be about co-planning and co-design, introductory concepts. This is an area that we have recently investigated in collaboration with the Institute of Technology Bandung, and also ITSB in our research project, and also in the Global Studio that we ran very recently in Indonesia, and something that's very core to what I've been researching and teaching for many years. Before I continue, as is the traditional here in Australia, I'd like to acknowledge that I am speaking from the University of Sydney campus, which is situated in Gadigal land, which is the indigenous group here from this part of Australia, and I'd like to pay my respects to the custodianship of this land for many, many, many millennia. So the lecture is gonna run through 8 parts. I mean, they're somewhat short sections. We're going to be talking first about participatory inquiry more broadly, and then a little bit of discussion about one particular way that participation in cities has developed over the years, which is what we call placemaking or urban prototyping with communities. Then I'm going to talk a bit more about the notion of co-production, of co-planning, and co-design. And then I give you a little introduction on practices of what we call design futuring, a very important concept of that's theory of change to support that effort of designing with people and aiming for a better future, and then wrap up with some key takeaways from the lecture today. So I'm going to start with participatory inquiry. The idea of participatory inquiry is, as the name implies, is to investigate possibilities in collaboration with people who will be suffering the consequences of that investigation. So it's about encouraging participation beyond the designer team, the planner team, or the research team. And the idea is it's not new. It's over 15 years old, and even before that, there was already some ideas floating around, especially in Northern Europe, in Scandinavia, about participatory design and participatory research. And underlying those approaches is this idea that the person who will eventually be served through the design process is given the position of expert of their own experience. and therefore should play a large role in knowledge development, in idea generation, and concept development. So it's essentially acknowledging that we as external researchers or external designers, urban planners, we may only have partial knowledge of the situation. We may have academic skills, we may have professional expertise, but we are not necessarily knowledgeable of the social reality of the people we are dealing with. They are the experts on their own lives. They are the experts on the situations and the struggles and the community involvement that they go through on a day-to-day basis. And therefore, we need to approach them from a position of humility, of a position of openness, to work with them and to learn from them throughout the process. So it's essentially what we're talking about here is to shift the spectrum of participation from what has been traditionally deemed as top-down, so the government or the researchers, going into a community, observing them and making decisions on their behalf, but without actually involving them, and to shift that to a much more inclusive participation where ideally the community will be leading the efforts. We may contribute to that as designers or planners, we may facilitate that process, but the actual process is led by the community, it's led by the users, the goals are determined by them, and the benefits are also absorbed by them. And that's far more likely to lead to different solutions than we would have imagined at the beginning, because again, that's based on reality, based on the expertise that they have about their lives, which is not necessarily obvious and hasn't necessarily been documented by anyone before. And therefore, that offers us with different assumptions, different approaches, and different ideas to enhance their situation. So one way that this has been popularized around the world in cities is this idea of placemaking or community engagement, and about prototyping our surroundings in the city to work better with us, right? So to reflect our identities, to forge a common identity between people of a community, to make everyone accountable for the shared public space, and to nurture those feelings of not only accountability and social bond, but also responsibility towards the city and towards the shared resources of across the community. So just to give a few examples, I mean, because that can happen at different levels, right? So initially, and by and large, in many big cities, especially in developed countries, but also in the global south, that often happens top down. So the government comes up with an idea, usually a big project, a big urban renovation or redevelopment project. Often takes the form of a new cultural precinct or a park, like in this case, and then that's imposed onto people. People may benefit from it, but they are not necessarily involved in that effort. So what we can see here on the screen is a photo of a park in Chicago, in the United States of America, called Millennium Park. And this is called the Crown Fountain. It's an artwork. It's a digital artwork, in fact. You have this screen, which is also a fountain. And the photos of the people on the screen were taken from, at least originally, taken from local high schools. So there was meant to reflect the regular citizen, the regular people from Chicago, amplify them, acknowledge their presence, and reflect them back into the broader community. And at the same time, creating a space that people can enjoy together, they can have fun, that they can just be there for leisure and share part of the city together and get to meet each other in that process. Now, this involves the community in participation and encourages participation from the community, but don't necessarily involve the community in the design process, right? And that's a very important distinction, because although the public might have had the opportunity to provide some feedback, they were not involved by and large in the design process. And once that's there, they may like it or not. They may engage in participation or not, but again, they are not part of the decision-making process. Now, a completely different approach from the bottom up that assumes that people have to be involved in decision making, they have to be involved in the design process, and they actually have to be involved in the implementation of those experiments in public space. And it doesn't have to be anything too big, like the fountain and the park that we just seen. It can be very smaller interventions. They can be very specific interventions in the public space that only serves the purpose of the local community, but in doing so, changes the dynamics of that part of the city. So what you can see here is an example from New Zealand, from the city of Christchurch. So Christchurch, like many places in Indonesia, often is stricken by earthquakes. And there was a very big earthquake a few years ago, at the beginning of the 20th century, at Christchurch, at the center of the city. And it destroyed quite a lot of the buildings there. So they were demolished, and the city was left with lots of vacant spaces, so empty spaces. Most of them were turned into car parks or little gardens. But then there was a group of artists and academics who got together and thought about, well, let's explore new uses for those spaces. Now we have this opportunity that we have a lot of empty spaces in the city center, so we should try to experiment with different purposes for those spaces, and in doing so, create a new identity for them that is more inclusive, that brings people in, and actually helps to reunite people after a traumatic event that was an earthquake. So they came up with this several different approaches, and this is one of the most interesting ones, where they pretty much, without much resources, they hacked a washing machine, to wash clothes, and with sensors like an Arduino board. If you're familiar with that, it's a very cheap like electronics boards, and you can hack it. And they hack it and connect it to speakers, which they installed around that space. And they brought in like a platform that people could step on, and would kind of create a stage in the center of the space. And they turned the washing machine into a jukebox. So essentially, anyone could come with a little $2 coin, insert that into the washing machine, and then plug the smartphone to the washing machine and play songs on the speakers, essentially turning that piece of the city into a dance floor or a performance space, right? And then, so they call it the dance omat, like as a pun to laundromat that you could use for dancing. And that became like a massive hit. Like, it was taken up massively by the population. It was installed as a temporary intervention at that part of the city, I think in 2012. And to the best of my knowledge, it's still there, or at least it was until very recently. It has been relocated to a different part of the city now, but it just became something that the entire population adopted, would use every now and then. I used that when I was there visiting Christchurch. I actually played with that. It's really good fun. It works for, I think, up to 20 minutes after you insert the coin, and you can have this impromptu party and make use of the shared space of the city that belongs to you as well as belongs to other people. And again, there are no boundaries. Everyone can come in and play. And that was, again, the purpose of this intervention. Completely organic, completely bottom up, without any intervention from the government and anyone else. And it transformed the city. This is what is often referred to as urban acupuncture. So if you're familiar with acupuncture, like the treatment where you put needles on your nerves, it kind of spreads out and makes the entire body to feel better and heals the pain. There is this analogy that by introducing something small in the city, but in a very specific place with a lot of thought, it may potentially create those ripples across the city that would increase well-being, that would increase social health and social cohesion, and would create new opportunities for people to come together and engage in social interactions. So we would work towards the health of the city by doing a very, very specific but well-thought intervention. right? Which is, again, it's bottom up, it's kind of co-designed by members of the public. And then you can have something that is like something in between. Like, so for example, you may have come across those apps for storytelling, or for like you go around the city and you hear sounds about specific points, like tourist guides often. And that is usually commissioned by either the government or by a company or by the tourist association, but is often also open to feedback from the public. And sometimes people can geotag things and upload it to the map and add new stories or new sounds to that platform. So that works like in between. It is set up by someone, usually a designer, but is open for participation and appropriation by anyone from the public, right? And that's what we call like middle out. It's not completely top down, imposed onto people. It's not completely bottom up, like in the sense that the community got together and did something together in the city. It works in between. And that's often what we do as academics, as researchers, but also as professional designers. Like, we mediate, we work by bringing different groups together and help them to achieve something that they could not necessarily be able to have achieved by themselves, right? We can bring them together, help them think through, help to coordinate the process, and then achieve something that, again, involves everyone in participation. So I collect some examples when I was in Indonesia about placemaking in kampongs. Again, they may take different characteristics. Some of them are very temporary. Some of them last for longer. There are things like usually around creativity. I mean, painting walls. You may have seen them around many parts of your city when you go around. I certainly seen them in Lebak Siliwangi, in Bandung, for example, and other Kampung Pelangi, which we just visited last month. And other parts of other Indonesian cities, in fact. Right? And that, again, it may have limited effect often in terms of the economy or even the lives of the people, but it helps to transform the perception about the space. And in isolation may not be enough, but it may be a step towards transformation, a step among many steps to transform the space and transform lives of the community and to give them agency and give them the opportunity to intervene in their surroundings. Because at the end of the day, they are the primary beneficiaries of that, right? So there have been quite a few of those examples in Indonesia, and especially I'm more familiar with the context of Bandung, which I encourage you to check in more detail later. I'm going to share the slides, and I encourage you to go and check them for themselves. And even if you find more material, please share those with me. I would really love to learn more about those examples later on, right? So, but I would really like that to be like the preamble for what I really like to talk about, which is, again, how can we make a difference as designers, right? What kind of role can we play? And then brings me to the topic of co-production. So when I talk about co-production, that's usually means doing something together, producing something together. And producing something together often involves several stages of thinking, right, and making. So it starts with co-planning, or planning together what kind of activities are going to do, who is going to be involved. When we say co, the prefix co implies shared responsibilities. So who are the different actors who are going to be sharing their responsibility, who are going to be helping to think together, and who are going to be making decisions together about what to be done. So this stage of co-planning, what are the problems we are trying to solve? What are the resources that we have available? What kind of resources we should try to find and to secure? Who can provide support to us? How much that's going to cost? Where is it going to be deployed? How much time do we need? All those thinking points and decision-making activities will be done together, but they have to be done before anything else. Or at least they have to be initiated before we actually start doing anything. And when we start doing things and actually experimenting with often with different options, right? You prototype something or you try something out. That's when we move into what we call co-design. So we already know the context, who is involved, what are the resources, what are the problems that we would like to solve, what is the time frame that we have available, how much money do we have, and then we start doing things, right? And often this doing is, as I mentioned before, is a prototype. It's about trying something first and see what happens. Something that therefore cannot be too expensive because it may not work. It cannot require too much money or too many resources because, again, we may just find that it doesn't work, so we need to try something else. But something that is it's manageable enough that can be done together. So we define a problem, we define what we have, how can we approach that in terms of potential solutions, and then we make it and we try to do it, deploy that into the community and observe and see what happens. So that involves two other stages, which is the deploying it, is the co-delivery. We are doing it together with the community. We are involving them in the implementation because they will be the ones that will be benefiting or suffering the consequences of that, but also the ones who are going to be maintaining it long term. And then we test it together. There's this stage of co-evaluation, of measuring the effectiveness of what we've done together with them. And if it didn't work or didn't quite work as expected, then we can start the cycle all over again. We go to another cycle of co-planning, of reflecting upon what we've done, planning what the next iteration is going to be, and then we go again to design, delivery, evaluation. And that can keep going forever, really, right? It's never truly done. There are always things to be improved. Communities change over time. The resources and the context may change over time. What can be done may change over time. And therefore, this process never truly ends. So when we talk about co-planning and co-design, they are parts of this broader cycle of co-production. Co-planning is about the taking together decisions about the vision, the values, the direction, the ambition, the resource allocation, the approach for what we're going to do. And co-design is about getting together to do something, right? To try some of those ideas out, making decisions about the specific implementation, what kind of interaction that's going to promote, what kind of service that's going to look like, if anything, or if we're going to talk about policy, specific sections of policy, and what exactly are we proposing to change. Right? So let's start with co-planning now. So with co-planning, often, again, it's finding out what the context is, what the challenges are, what are the resources, what can we possibly do together. There are established approaches to do so. One of them is called participatory rural appraisal, or PRA, which is it's a iteration of a much older approach called rapid rural appraisal. So the idea was to go to a rural regional community and observe how people live, talk to them, even live with them for a while, and get therefore an embodied understanding of their lives and their challenges, but also the resources and the skills that are present in the community. But at the beginning, the rapid rural appraisal, or RRA, it wouldn't necessarily involve the community. You would go there as a researcher, observe them, and then you make conclusions after that, and you come up with a solution. A participatory rural appraisal, it's the opposite. It's about flipping the process of designing. So you go to the community to understand them without preconceptions, without judgment, and really let them tell you whatever they want to tell you, in the way they want to tell you, and help them think through their problems, right? So although the name is rural, that oftentimes start to be used in informal settlements because, again, they share a lot of they're very distinct environments within the formal city, right? They share some of the informality that's found in rural communities, and often some of the same challenges. But that it's all about empowering the community to express, develop, share, and analyze their knowledge about their lives and surroundings to help them plan and take action, right? And the idea is not to do anything too big. It's about taking small steps, but progressive steps. So coming up with solutions or interventions that can be flexible, that can be cost effective, that can be done quickly, so they're time efficient, and therefore that can be done, but also take into account not only the current present that you can observe, but also hearing about the history of the community, so the past conditions, and also their aspirations about the future, and therefore doing something that would work for them, that would actually be meaningful to them, right? It allows you to get this deeper understanding of local communities. So there are a few methods that you can use as a designer. As I said before, you can just go to the community and observe. We can also, talk to people, interview them. One of the most interesting and effective ways of getting to know a community and a place is just go for a walk with them, like guided by them to the places that they regard as special, as important, or as problematic within their neighborhood, and hearing from them why is that place special, problematic, or meaningful to them. And then start to map out geographically, but also socially, the challenges and the opportunities. So, this is the place where they normally floods. So this is the place where they do urban farming, right? So all the problems, but also the innovation that's happening in that precinct, to start to put that on the map, because that can give you a very good insight in the social life behind those problems and behind those solutions, and how people come together, who lives nearby those places, why those places are not others. So all the dynamics that may be involved, they're connected to the place, but are actually translated into the way people do things about those problems and how they come about to innovate into solutions. Mapping all that development, it's often quite insightful. And it's also simple things to do. They don't require much resources, money or otherwise, or equipment. It really just involves our ability and disposition to be present with the community, to be humble, to hear from them, and to be guided by them, no matter how they guide you. Co-design plays along a very similar playbook. Like, again, it's the next step after co-planning. And then again, it's all about changing the classical approach to making things, which often involved, again, the designer or the researcher going to a place, observing, coming back to the lab or to the university, creating something, and then deploying it, right? And that actually involves a change of mindset to rather than coming up with solutions, you encourage the users to give you their solutions, and then we can work with them. So it's about sitting together as equals. Like, I'm not the expert and you are the user. You are expert at different things, right? And coming together to discuss and coming up with solutions. So this shift of mindset of the user as a subject that we can observe and design for, to a partner, like someone we can work with in coming up with innovations. And I like this slide very much, because to me this synthesizes what co-design actually is, which is, and what can we do as designers when we are engaging participation with communities, especially disadvantaged communities. We have skills, right? We are experts in our field. We are either working professionally as designers, or we are students of design, and by design I mean also urban design and planning, of course. Maybe professionals working in the industry, and we know the methods, we know case studies, we know the literature, but we don't know the community. So we are expert citizens, right? We are citizens, members of the city, who are experts in certain things, namely design, planning, but we don't have any expertise on that community and the struggles that they go through. So they are experts in that context. They are citizens as well, just like us, who are experts in their own contexts. So it's this combination of complementary expertise. Like we have the academic knowledge or the professional knowledge. We are expert citizens, and we are working with other citizens who are also experts, but in different things. And they are much better knowledgeable and adaptable than we are in that context. So that complements our knowledge. But by doing so, because often those communities are neglected, they are often ignored, or they are not a part of general design efforts or even government initiatives. So a lot of people don't know their story, and therefore it's our role to become a storyteller, to tell their stories to others, like to disseminate awareness about their community, their struggles, but also their innovation capabilities, their skills, their resourcefulness, and the ways that they are trying to solve their own problems. So we become storytellers, we become ambassadors for them in a way outside their community. We represent them when we're talking to government. We represent them when we are giving academic talks or lectures like this. We are talking about them. We're talking on their behalf, but acknowledging that they are the experts. But when talking about their story and telling their story to others, we have also to frame them in a way that become appealing to our audience. So if you're talking to government, we may tell the story in certain ways that would be more effective for government to be persuaded that their participation would be interesting to them, right? That those communities, they're also citizens that demand attention and care. If you're talking to giving a lecture or a conference talk, we may focus on the potential research findings or potential contribution to new knowledge about compounds, for example. So we become translators of this story. We translate it to a language that is easily understood and appealing to the audience we are talking to. But behind all that, we are still telling the story of the community that we're working with, and we are representing them and making justice to their expertise. So when you go to talk to the community, often that takes time to really get an understanding, because again, we are not familiar with their environment. So if you just go and observe and talking to people, we can get some knowledge. But then again, people are only going to tell you what they want to tell you, right? So you may not get the full story. You may get only a very smaller part of the truth. The more you go there and observe, not only hear to what people have to say, but you observe what they are actually doing, who they are talking to, when they are doing what, then you start to have a better appreciation about the underlying social dynamics, the social values, the social norms, the political tension that may exist. So you start to get a bit deeper under the surface and get some understanding about what are the drivers of their behavior and what they do and they don't do, for example. And one way to go even further is to run what we call co-design workshops, where you provide activities which are low risk, they're not threatening, they're very easy activities to do, but you do many of them. And then the combination of those activities allow people to express themselves in different ways. And then you can triangulate and come up with a richer perspective, right? Or at least a richer picture of the reality from different perspectives, because you are asking different questions at different times to the same people. And then you can really get deeper and get a much better and complex, nuanced appreciation of their lives. So that's where we want to get, but that takes time. So once you get that understanding, that the question becomes, okay, so now that we understand their lives and their struggles, what do we do with that? Where would they like to be in the future? If they could solve some of the problems they currently have, if they could improve some of the aspects of their lives, what would that be? And that talks about, again, looking at the future. We already understood the past, we understood the present, so now we look at the future and try to come up with desirable futures. So we're talking about the future. There's this idea of, it's often referred to as the cone of future possibilities. So if you imagine where we are today, being at the left, a point in time, and you look at the future, you can think about it as like you have many things may happen, right? So if something happens, it's going to lead to something else, it's going to lead to something else. But if something else happened in the beginning, then the future is going to be completely different. So we have this idea of a divergent range of possibilities in the future, depending on what we do today. Some of those possible futures are more desirable than others. Like some of them, if we don't do anything, probably things are going to stay as they are in the future. If there are few things that we can do now, they are more likely to create certain kinds of future possibilities, so they are plausible. And some of them are possible, although they may be less probable, and some of them would be really highly improbable. It could happen, but I mean, that would require something that extraordinary to bring that into fruition. And if you have that, if you map that out, all those possible futures, then we can choose which one would we prefer. And when we work with communities, we would work with them to try to understand what would be their preferred future, the preferred state they would like to get to together. And then we can work towards that. So one very interesting way of deciding what to do, once you identify with the community where they are going to get, where they would like to be in the future, if they could just imagine, that means if they're dreaming about a better life in the future, what would that be? What would be their life? Then rather than trying to forecast things like, well, based on the current economic trends and the investment from the government and levels of disease intervention, health interventions from the government, we're probably going to get there. That may not be where they want to be. So that's forecasting only reflects the current constraints that we may have in the system. A much better way much more creative way of thinking about it is to look at that preferred future that the community has expressed to you, and then ask yourself, okay, if that is to happen, if that's to be possible at all, what needs to happen just before, right? So what are the very immediate conditions that need to be in place for that next best condition be in place? And then you look at that point in time, okay, for these preconditions to be in place, what needs to happen just before? And you start to do that repeatedly until you get back to the present. That's what we call backcasting. You start with the end. You start with the preferred future, and then you try to come up with the conditions, or to understand the conditions that need to be met so that that future emerges. For example, very quick example, I'm aware of the time, so very quick example. If you look at Lebak Siliwangi Kampong in Bandung, next to the ITB Ganesha campus, which we've been working with for the past few years, they have at the center of the neighborhood, they have the Cikapundung River, which I mean, it's a continuous process of being cleaned up, but it could be cleaner, could be better. Still a lot of waste flows into the river, sometimes from upstream, sometimes from the community. You can see that some of them in the photo here. There are also problems with water supply for some of the residences. So if we imagine a future where at some point in the future, let's say by 2050, although that may not be the actual year, but some point in the future, all residents will have access to clean water from the tap, like they can drink water from the tap, right? And the Cikapundung River will be clean, so people can swim bath on the river if they want to. If that would be desirable. If that is to happen, what needs to happen just before? Well, you can imagine, at the minimum, you need to improve the sewage system. We may have some more septic tanks that work continuously. They are maintained. We need also to improve waste management so that waste doesn't end up in the river, recycling programs. So that is a precondition for that desirable future. And then you can ask yourself, okay, for the sewage system to be improved, for the septic tanks to be installed and working, being maintained, for waste to be managed and recycled properly, what needs to happen? Well, we need to have implementation and maintenance of functional septic tanks. You may have also to implement multiple shared toilets, washing stations across the RWs, effective way to collect waste that is consistent and continuously work, and is cheap, it is affordable, and so on and so forth. And you keep doing that exercise until we get to the present. When you do that, then you have a roadmap. But also you may find out that, well, we need more help. We need more resources. And then you can start thinking about who should we actually talk to right now so that we can have a minimum chance or a real chance of that little brighter golden future that everyone would like to be part of eventually happens in the future, right? That is the value of backcasting. And another way to go about it is to come up with what we call a theory of change, which is a real plan to get there, to that future. Like, a theory of change is often referred to a bridge. Like, so we know where we are, we know where we came from, we know where we are, we know where we like to be, what that bright future would be. And often consultants and designers come up with this idea, oh yeah, we identify the problem, identify the future, then this solution, come up with this solution here, which we think is going to work, but there are no details about, well, okay, but how exactly that's going to take us to the future, right? So those challenges are often referred to as the missing middle between the past, the present, actually, and the future. So a theory of change addresses precisely that. It's about filling in that missing middle with clear activities and interventions that are often identified through backcasting, but would lead to that future, right? So it first involves, if you go to the third point there, it first involves identifying that preferred future that I was talking about, the desired long-term goals, and then working backwards from that to identify all the conditions that must be in place for those goals to occur. That's precisely what I just described as backcasting, right? Once you do that, you have a plan. You have a theory for the change to come about through concrete steps and actions that can be done, feasibly be done, as long as the resources and support are in place. So there are many ways of coming up with a theory of change, but this is one that I find very simple and it's a good starting point. So you identify the future. So we start from the end. We start from the impact, like the long-term social changes, the better future we would like to become the present at some point. And then you walk backwards, like what are the outcomes from anything we do now, what are the outcomes those actions will produce to lead to that impact. And then by outcomes, that they're usually higher level changes, like cleaning the river or improving water access. They are higher level changes, but then you need to come up with the details of how exactly you can clean up the river or how exactly you can provide clean water to everyone. So those will lead to what we call outputs, which are specific results. There may be many outputs, which will lead to a broader outcome and then an even broader impact. So start to narrow it down to concrete activities that you can do now and maybe next year, maybe the year after. And what needs to be brought in for those activities to happen. Well, we may need more money, or we may need more equipment, or we may need more political action, or we may need more partners like the university and the government and this private sector, everyone together. We can identify what needs to be invested for that longer term impact to become possible, right? And also that also involves defining what do we mean by impact. So if you say like that future is desirable, is desirable, why is that desirable? And desirable by whom? Who is going to be benefiting? How much they're going to be benefiting from that? Like, so often when you are starting a project, you need to define that. Like, what is the definition of success? Who is defining impact? Right? And it cannot be us as designers or researchers, right? Again, it has to be the community. They have to define, okay, what is success for them? What is a good future for them, right? What is good? What are we switching from? What is bad now that we would like to move away from? But as designers, often you have to work with other stakeholders, you have to work with the government, you have to work with private sectors, NGOs often. So we may need to find different ways to justify for them why they should be part of this. What is the benefit for them? What are the metrics of success for the government? What is the metrics of success for the NGO, for the university? Because they may be very different. So you need to come up with all these definitions of success, which may be different for different participants of the project. And you need to fulfill all of them in order to really come up with what really matters, which is a better future for the community. But crucially is about contributing to them. That's very important, this idea of contribution over attribution. So it's not about taking the credit and the merit, we solve their problem, or the government solve their problem, right? Or this NGO solve their problem. It's about contribution. We all work together, and also together with the community, to bring this better future to become a reality. And that's the idea of the in co-planning and co-design. Is a shared responsibility and is a shared success story, right? So it's about collaborating, coordinating together, and consolidating those successes, right? So that they can remain successful into the future. A final example that I like to share, a final method, is what we call social lean canvas. Again, that's again part of the idea of this theory of change. Is a more detailed way of thinking. So when you approach a problem, you go to a community, the first thing is to define the problem, right? And you don't have to elaborate it too much. Usually just a very short description can be helpful, because then you can then define, okay, what do we feel we can do to address that problem? That becomes a mission. That's going to be the goal of the project, the definition of success for the community. And then you can start mapping out, okay, who else should be involved? Who should be the key partners in this? Who should we work with? Who do we need permission from? What are the key activities we are going to do? What are we going to do? What do we need for it? The key resources in terms of money, equipment, people, skills. What would be the value that we are going to be adding? I mean, why we, right? Why should we be actually doing this, right? So what kind of value are we proposing through our participation? And you start to map out the relationships as well, like the relationships between the people in the community and let's say the RW leaders, between the RW leaders and the municipality, between all of them and the university, between all of them and NGOs and the private sector, and so on, because that may help to coordinate collaboration. It's helpful if you think about the future, not to think about solution only, but also how it will remain sustainable. So where the money is going to come to keep supporting that solution into the future? What is the cost structure, right? And therefore also the intended impact into the future, like this is going to improve the lives of the sanitation by, I don't know, 50 families in this neighborhood for 5 years. And then we are also going to create through urban farming a social income so that they can continue to fund. It's going to have training programs so they can sustain and repair their own septic tanks whenever they break, and so on and so forth. So you come up with a plan of sustainability into the future. And once you have that mapped out, then you can take that to discussions with the government, with potential investors, with others who can become part of the project and help to make that happen, because you have a very clear breakdown of everything that's related to that problem. All right, so that brings me to the end of the lecture. So some key takeaways. If you have to take only 4 things from this lecture, the first one is that when you're talking about co-design, co-planning, participation more broadly, that's more than just consultation with communities. That's about actually flipping the process so they become the leaders and you become a facilitator, because participation leads to political agency and to feelings of autonomy and even self-esteem. but it also, more importantly, leads to better solutions for them, solutions that they would deem as valuable and meaningful. The second point is that among all possible futures, it's worth and it's wise aiming at those which are plausible, that can actually be done. It's better to have a small improvement than trying to aim for a very large improvement that is impossible to happen. Aiming for things that are small improvements, but they can concretely happen, the low-hanging fruits, as you often refer them to, is much better. You can get a lot done, and you can make incremental improvements, but then which, when taken together, represent a very big improvement from the original status. Now, it's less about solving a problem and more about moving towards better scenarios. The third point is that social impact must balance metrics or the outputs with the vision, the longer term impacts, the outcomes. And it's about contribution rather than taking the merit for the success, right? It's about playing a part, contributing the way that you can as a member of a broader team, right? To engage into bottom up or middle out approaches. And finally, it's about keeping in mind that this is a design-led approach. So it's not about solving the problem immediately. It's about going without too many resources, trying to do things quickly but well thought with the resources that we have available, by engaging people and then iterating, like repeating over and over and over to calibrate things, to refine things, and to get progressively towards better futures. And then having a theory of change and a social link canvas can be very helpful in staying on track, knowing when we're getting towards, and also negotiating with potential supporters and the government. So there was a lot in here in the lecture, but hopefully that was helpful to you. You can get the slides from this lecture from this QR code, but I'm also going to be sharing them with everyone later. And with that, I would like to end my lecture. So, hatur nuhun, terima kasih banyak semuanya. And if there are any questions, I'm very happy to answer them today or later today. Feel free to contact me as well if you have any questions. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Luke, for that insightful presentation. And now we move into the interactive Q&A session. Please feel free to submit your question via Zoom chat, and I'll be reading them aloud and direct them to Dr. Luke for response.
Yep.
So
I'll keep the takeaways on the screen so you can refer
okay,
to that.
it's okay. Ada yang mau bertanya, silakan. Bahasa Indonesia juga boleh langsung raise hand mungkin, atau ditulis ya, dicatat. So let's keep the conversation flowing. Your third and question will be highly valued. Nanya apa aja silakan, bebas ya. Jadi Dr. Luke ini segala macam desain gitu. All kind of design. First time I ask you, what kind of design that you do? You said all kind of design, from macro to micro details. So today lecture is more about social design, where sustainable equitability and future-ready urban solution requires shifting from designing for people to designing with and by people. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct. That's correct. So it's about
That way.
that level of design, which often we refer to as social design because it has social outcomes, but also is referred often as systems design. So there's a lot of factors in place that often we can't change. Like we can't change the political system. We can't change a very widespread social climate, like weather-related disadvantage, or those problems are too big. But we can try to intervene in certain parts of this system, as we call it, and change that little part. And by changing that little part, that again will have some consequences for other parts of the system, and then we can progressively get into a better stage. So it's about having awareness of the longer term picture of this, the complexity of the problem. We often refer them to wicked problems, and what can we effectively do and then do it in a way that's as effective as possible.
I think we have now one question from Sabrina. I guess you have already met her. So I just read. How can the implementation of co-planning help reduce spatial conflicts such as land conversion, urban village eviction, and conflicts of interest between stakeholders?
Yeah, great question. Again, it's probably not very wise to think about one intervention that can solve all that, because again, those are very complex problems, and it's, as I was saying before, those so often we talk about wicked problems, so which are problems with no real solution, right? They can be addressed from different perspectives, but there are always going to be some better consequences than others and some pros and cons. So there's no perfect solution because they're very complex problems. But what we can do is try to, one, map out all those aspects. Like, so why are they complex, right? Why eviction, for example, is such a complex problem? I mean, it relies on lack of tenure. Then why is the lack of tenure? What are the different kinds of tenure that could be created? Who is the owner of the land to begin with? What kind of programs the government has implemented that could be maybe used in this situation? So that demands a much deeper understanding of the history of the problem, how are people affected today, and then trying to come up with a range of possible, I wouldn't call solutions, but possible interventions that would be bring the reality of the people to a slightly better scenario. So again, there's no easy way to answer the question, but it's often about at least engaging with the people and engaging with the other side of the problem. And often there are many different sides. But let's say in the case of eviction, you have the community and you may have the owners of the land, let's say the government. And then engaging with both and understanding what are the values and the interests behind the position that they declare. So the residents declare, I would like to stay here. I've been living here for generations. Yeah, I don't own the land, but I mean, it's my community. We've been taking care of this land for so long. We don't want to leave. We don't have anywhere else to go. And the government may say, well, but we own the land before you came here, right? We're not paying taxes or and like so on and so forth. Like we have the rights to sell the land and to evict you, and or even we can give you a better future somewhere else, not here, right? You can build it somewhere else. So then you have to keep asking yourself, why? Why is that the case? Like, what is driving that conviction that, okay, they can actually evict those people when they have nowhere else to go? Why not to work with them, right? You can start coming up with alternative scenarios. So let's imagine if they could stay there and the government could also work with them, and maybe it can be a mutual gain, like some form of arrangement that can be beneficial for everyone. And it's probably cheaper than relocating everyone anyway. So we can start to explore those creative scenarios through conversation. Once you understand what are the obstacles preventing dialogue to happen in the first place. That is design, right? That is designing, again, redesigning the system, redesign the relationships. And in doing so, at this higher level, then you can come up with co-planning for specific interventions. So let's say the government now is going to invest in that community by providing, I don't know, training for them in certain skills, and the community would commit to participate in those trainings and get upskilled and therefore generate income so they can pay, I don't know, reliably pay a range to the government. I'm just coming up with that right now. I'm not suggesting that's a good solution, but like thinking along those lines that the ways that they could work together to advance the current situation to a slightly better, more reliable, and more sustainable future. It's not solving the problem. It's not solving all the problems, but it's again making the situation a bit better. And when you get to this a bit better scenario, then you can do it again and again and again, right? So that's the designerly approach, like iterating, and every time you iterate, you advance the situation a bit further. Does that answer your question, Sabrina?
Yeah, Sabrina. Maybe you can open your mic. Sabrina, are you there? Okay,
Okay,
let's
let me know if that answers your
I think
question.
yeah. Let me know. Give a sign or something. Okay, I think there's another question from
Yeah.
YouTube, but I don't think I can see that. Pak Daddy, can you help me? Because it's not in the Zoom. Oh,
In WhatsApp group, maybe, Bu Ida, you can
okay,
read it.
okay. The context of developing countries such as Indonesia, how can PRA be used to reduce the communication gap between local communities, local governments, and private developers about the PRA, participatory
Rural appraisal, yes.
rural appraisal.
So again, it's connected to to the answer to the previous question in a way, which is about first of all, understanding what is preventing that communication from happening right now, right? So what are the reasons why there is a communication gap in the first place, right? That something exists that is preventing more regular dialogue between, let's say, for the sake of an example here, between the communities, government, and private developers, right? Of course, you may imagine and try to have a good guess. Well, maybe that's related to legal rights, or maybe something else, some speculation about the land, or maybe, I don't know, the government prefers to look at other communities who will be they deem as more urgently in need, or maybe we have like vote for them, right? So we have that a lot in Australia, like that certain governments only look to certain communities because that keeps them in power. Again, we don't know. That's all possible explanations. So what PRA allows you to do, and any other kind of participatory approach, is to hear those explanations from the people involved. Again, the whole point is that you don't jump into conclusions yourself, right? You may have your theories about to explain why there is no communication between those parties, but you need to validate those assumptions. So PRA and participatory approaches in general requires you to put all those assumptions aside and really go and engage and listen more than anything else. Listen and observe to people. And by people, I mean not only the communities who are struggling with those problems, but also ideally, and if possible, go and sit with government, go and sit with the private developers and hear their perspectives as well, right? And that doesn't mean agreeing with the different perspectives, but it's to getting a much better and realistic appreciation about the root causes of that communication gap. So why don't they talk, right? Why they would not feel like proactively engaging in dialogue with the other side? And they may have a lot of different reasons, but like really getting to that level of understanding from the people directly, which often is connected to values, is connected to interests, right? So usually that is a scale of you have values, things that you consider valuable to you, that you should put effort towards, and then you have interests, which come on top of values, like they help you to fulfill your values. Right? That becomes some certain things becomes more interesting than others because you perceive that you can gain more from that, and that leads to behavior. So just observing behavior doesn't explain much. We really need to get to the level of the interests and then the values under those interests. And what we often find is that the values are actually the same. It's just expressed from different perspectives, right? At the very, very, very core, everyone wants to be able to continue to do what they're doing. They want to provide to their family. They want to keep themselves in good health. and so on and so forth. They kind of share values. It's the way that it gets expressed gets translated through different um, profiles in life and get enacted through different resources. So if you are in government, you may have a very different way of getting to those, fulfill those values of continue employed, earning money, provide to your family, feeling like appreciated. Than if you are living in a kampong, you have much less resources, and you may have less power to act. But you share those values. And then if you can bring it to the level of values rather than interest or positions, then you can often have a common ground. And from there, you can potentially come up with creative solutions to fulfill those values and change the positions. I know it sounds quite utopic, but that is a long-term process. But again, that's far more effective once we really understand why people are doing what they're doing. And in your case here, why they are not doing what they should be doing, which is just getting together and talking to each other and listening to each other, then it becomes much easier to bridge that gap, to come up with a theory of change of, okay, if we just set up the right conditions, maybe we need to bring someone else in. Maybe we need to bring the university, right? Maybe we need to frame that as a workshop with students, then government attends and the community attends. Maybe we need to have that as a public festival, which has nothing to do um, with land tenure, but it's just getting people together to do something and to get used to talk to each other. And then you can kind of soften up those preconceived assumptions and get people to talk about important problems as well, right? So it's often coming up with those side strategies informed by your deeper understanding of the reasons why people are not talking, to come up with the strategies to bring them together around a table. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. I think from
That was from YouTube, right? Yes. So hopefully that answers your
from
question.
YouTube, so I cannot this. Okay, there's another question from Reksa Aditya from Metallurgical Tech Engineering. I have a case where we are in a white empty room. What kind of design will we make? For example, 3D geometric design.
Oh, okay. Well,
That's the question.
um, I guess a question that you should actually ask before trying to answer the question is, what kind of problem are we trying to solve, right? So there is this temptation often in design, which is, we have this tool, let's see what problems can we solve with that, right? That happens a lot with technology, right? I've worked a lot with designing with technology. So like now we have 3D modeling, right? Or we have augmented reality. So let's see what kind of problems can we solve with this. That can be helpful, but at the same time, it's the wrong way of thinking, right? You don't go around with, I mean, that's always often this example. You don't go around with a hammer and try to solve all your problems with a hammer, right? It's just a tool. It may work well for certain problems. It may have no purpose for other problems. So it's about understanding the problem and the right tools for the job in the first place. And when you understand the problem, that is much easier to find what to do. And it can go to like I think you said, a white room, right? So then you can go to we often refer to that as the lab, right? So the lab, which is sort of outside of reality, is a protected space, a space where you can really think by yourself and focus on work. But you need to know what kind of work we're doing in the first place and what kind of tools we're using. So just staying on the white room is not very helpful, and without having a good understanding first of what to do in the white room. And the way to break the walls of the white room is to go out, live with the community, observe them, so participating with them in the understanding of the problem, and then be guided by them about what could be interesting to do. Then you can go back to your white room and access your tools, right? And sit there for a while and try to come up with the best idea that you can, and then go back to the community to discuss that idea with them, right? So the whole idea of participation is that you don't work by yourself. Like, you don't stay in your white room trying to come up with good solutions, because you are far from the people who are going to be using that solution. So we need to be with them as much as possible. But yes, escape to a white room so that we can have focus, dedicated, and productive time once you know what the problem is. I hope that answers your question somehow.
Ya, semoga itu ya, Reksa kejawab. Jadi kalau lagi bingung, kosong, ya tergantung ya. Looks at, it's depend on what the problem is. Okay, next we have, wow, this is quite long from Mr. Asep Irwan. I think you can read also. The topic discussed is very interesting. Indonesia concern over coastal changes in northern Java is increasing. Together with President Prabowo, the government plans to construct a massive seawall, the giant seawall, stretching from Banten to Gresik. Hundreds of kilometers of seawall will be built. Yet the project is highly complex due to several factors, including the continuously changing morphology along the northern coast of Java. Currently, the abrasion management on the northern coast of West Java tends to be sectoral and lacks of integrated spatial framework. So the main issue lies in social behavior. So the question, how can we integrate spatial planning with prediction of sinking cities, particularly in northern Java? Is that correct?
Well, that's a very good question and probably beyond my expertise. So I can give you my best thought about it, but please don't go implementing anything based on my answer, because that's not my expertise really. But I guess again, thinking about the process to try to answer this question. So talking about two different things that need to work together, right? So there's the reality of sinking cities, right? In coastal abrasion, and then there is what can be done in terms of spatial planning, or even about in terms of urban redevelopment, to mitigate the risks imposed by that reality of sinking cities. So the way I would see it, without again knowing the problem in detail, and again without risking any technical opinion because it's not my expertise, but in terms of the process of thinking through possible solutions, the way I see it's a lot about risk assessment, right? So understanding what are the risks imposed by the sea advancing into cities and the sinking nature of the cities. So trying to come up with models about the impact of that if nothing is done. What is the probable future? Like, so if you think about the cone of possible futures that I was talking about, if nothing is done, what's going to happen, right? That is the baseline. Anything is better than that, right? So you determine the worst possible scenario, which is completely inaction, no one does anything, the cities are still sinking, and you have information from the science, from the geographers. I mean, what would be the consequences to those communities? Then you have an argument to develop in the sense of, okay, this is the cost of not doing anything. Now, if we do this, then we may mitigate the risk and bring it from this level of severity to a much more manageable level. If you do this other solution, well, maybe we're going to improve certain aspects. We're going to give you better shelter. You're still going to have occasional flooding, but you're going to have immediate support. You can relocate, or it's going to be alarms in place. I don't know, like, or if you redevelop, like you rezone the whole thing in different ways, that will give the community far more capacity to be resilient. And then you're talking about the construction of the seawall. Maybe that can be justified in terms of the benefits that will bring to the way that the land is going to be rezoning. So again, you can build the argument like people need to move because that's the only way to save them. Or maybe they don't need to move, but I mean, there are a few other ways. And then you can weigh them. Okay, this is better than this, or I mean, this has this just benefits and problems. This other solution, there's these benefits and problems, and then we can discuss which direction we go, because there's no perfect solution. So again, it's a lot about thinking through the problem, understanding the risks, and then understanding what kind of strategies do we have available to mitigate those risks. It's unlikely the end solution is going to be perfect. Every proposal is going to be pros and cons. So being outlining those pros and cons and then being transparent with the communities in terms of, look, this is all that we can do. We have all those possible options. Some options have better benefits for you. Some options are more risky. And therefore, then we can come up with an agreement about what will be the best possible solution, not the best solution ever, but a solution that is better than the others at this point in time, right? So it's about thinking through risk management. I think that would be one way to address that without, again, having technical knowledge about the problem. So those are my 2 cents of contribution to this question.
Hope that answer, Pak Asep. Later on,
Yeah,
probably
thank
Pak
you,
Asep
Mr.
will
Luke.
be.
Thank you.
Yes, hello.
Hello, thank you.
Pak Asep is a lecturer from civil engineering.
Oh, hello.
Pursuing
Nice to meet you.
doctoral
Nice to meet you, sir.
study
Yeah,
doctoral this
yeah.
semester.
I believe it is Singsi City in Indonesia is around in the world and important and one the challenges for planner and civil engineering today.
Okay,
Okay, next, so we
nice to meet you.
move on to the next question. There are questions from YouTube also, from media. Beyond PRA and RRA, what alternative approaches can be utilized to support co-planning and co-design process?
Okay, so there are a few other approaches depending on what level are we working with and at what point in time you find yourself in terms of the engagement with that community. PRA and RRA, my understanding of them is that they're usually the first tools that you apply. Like, so you have no interaction with a particular community, so you're seeking to start understanding what they do, how they live, what the challenges are, what the possible solutions are. So it's all about that, what we in research we call ethnographic knowledge, right? So getting that knowledge from being in place with them and being guided by them. So that's the very first point of contact. And of course, you can have iterations of that participatory approach. But at some point, you have to start engaging into, again, co-design. Like, so you not only try to understand the context, but you actually start to discuss what can be done. And then you could start moving towards more like a bottom-up approach of trying things out, like with little resources. If you could experiment with some aspects of the solution, just to test if would that really work with people who really adopt it in a small scale. So you move into what we call urban prototyping or community prototyping, right? Which is about making little things which are kind of pilot projects. And then you go from there. I mean, if they work, then we can try to engage with other stakeholders, doing like a systems mapping to have proposals for the government or for funders, for NGOs to work together and scale things up. But at the roots of that, it's less about the label of, I mean, using PRA, RRA, but it's about the regularity of engagement, of keeping coming back to the community, to not only to brainstorm ideas with them, but also to hear feedback on the ideas that you may have and the proposals that you may have from them. And ideally, you would move to a situation where you have some sort of a committee, some form of working group, which includes not only yourself and your colleagues, but also the leaders in the community, right? And then you're going to regularly work with them as a project team, right? That is the level of co-planning or co-design that we'd like to get to, right? It's not like we are working with them, we understand them, and then we're going to go away, come up with a solution and discuss that with them. We're actually going to work with them all the way, right? We're going to involve them because that gives accountability as well. right? If you give them the chance to provide feedback throughout the process, then they are invested in making that work, right? They can contribute to the sustainability, to the maintenance of that solution, and they're gonna feel like they own that as well, right? And then often translates into better care for the solutions provided, better support for similar initiatives in the future, and willingness to engage. Coming back to the question about lack of dialogue, right? If there is one opportunity for dialogue, that builds trust. So at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is nurturing trust over and over, right? It's less about the label that we use and more about the approach and the willingness to sit together with the communities and listen to them and bringing them into decision making, right? But in terms of methods, yeah, I mean it's variations of PRA, so interviews, workshops, and walking with them and listening to them, more importantly.
Okay, Widya, I hope that answer. Okay, I have probably before others question, I would like to ask to look, considering I'm the designer. So how can from your slide social in Canvas, so how can the designer move beyond value proposition thinking to embrace relational,
Yeah.
cultural, and non-market values that community prioritize?
Excellent question. I mean, that's a continuous challenge that we face in the design field, right? We tend to think very narrowly, right? So because that's what we've been trained to do, in the sense of we can go out and engage, like this idea of diverging, having lots of ideas, listening from a lot of people, but then we tend to converge back and to come back to our team, our lab, or our design company, and ideate, right? And which means like narrowing the scope helps us to think through and coming up with, okay, manageable solutions. But that has little value if then we don't open up again and try to consider the potential implications of that solution, right? So design has been very good in coming up with tangible and practical implementations that would address specific problems, or often short-term problems, but it hasn't been so good in anticipating the consequences of those solutions, right? And those consequences often play out not among the users we're developing, but somewhere else. Like, so for example, we can come up with, take the smartphone, right? So it has a lot of benefits, of course, right? I mean, even computers, and so maybe some of you may be watching this lecture on your phone, for example. So it has a lot of benefits for access information, for communication, for participation in society, and that's great. However, the introduction of the smartphone we need to make the actual phones. We need to extract resources that are only found in certain places, and that may lead to environmental problems in certain countries, and because of destruction of certain materials, exploitation of local communities, which again, if you only look at the problem that you are designing for, I mean, designing something for people to communicate and remote access resources and so on, those consequences are not there, but they are completely there if you take a broader picture and look at the entire supply chain for the making of a phone, the consequences in terms of energy demand, and the environmental impact of having ubiquitous technology, and the fact that many communities are exploited to support this ecosystem to exist. So the problems are in the periphery, like when it's not in the narrow scope that we're looking at as designers, but they are still there because they are inherent conditions for the existence of this ecosystem, the digital ecosystem, right? And that the same sort of mechanism applies for any design solution. So what we've been trying to do as a community is, again, having this relational thinking, like try to anticipate the consequences to the system of introducing a particular solution. I think the easiest way to think about it is the example of, again, the carbon footprint or the environmental cost. Like, things need to be done. They don't come out of the air, right? You need to source all the materials. People have to work to source those materials, to assemble those phones or equipment. And then you need power to run it. And then at some point they break, you need to dispose them or recycle them. As designers, traditionally, we would be looking at what kind of app can we develop, right? But there's all this ecosystem and the implications that are involved. And if you talk about social design, you are looking at the society as your user. So everything you design, what are the consequences? How society is going to change, and as a result of that new thing you are developing. There's a designer, a North American designer, which is also very thought-provoking. It's called Mike Monteiro. He has written a lot of books about, again, the responsibility that designers have for the very dire situation that we find ourselves in the world, especially in terms of the environment, but also in terms of social relationships and class exploitation, poverty, and so on. The fact that the Global South often funds the Global North and pays the price for the development of the Global North, and all those consequences that, again, they are not apparent for many people. And he has a very interesting talk about how designers destroyed the world. I think that's the title, which is very interesting, because once you realize that you have a responsibility for everything you design or everything you decide not to design, then you can no longer think about that responsibility, right? You always start thinking about relationships and the unintended consequences of all you do. But that takes time to develop, but it's something that we absolutely need to do because we don't really have any other option.
All right. Thank you, Luke, for this fruitful discussion. So anyone will still, I think we have one more question probably. Lecturer or students? Yes, Pak Daddy?
Pak Daddy has his hand up.
Daddy QT?
Okay, very interesting lecture. So it's in my mind how to get planning with a different kind of approach. But in Indonesia, it's like they have a scale of the planning, like in national, province, and until the kecamatan. But in your opinion on your practice, what kind of scale that we can go with the co-planning and co-design? I think, yeah, because it's like maybe it doesn't work in national planning maybe, or yeah. What scale do you prefer
Yeah.
in planning? And the second thoughts and the second question is uh in international, like in Indonesia, it's like we have Musrembang. It's like tend to give people to do in planning in planning. Is there any of like this in Australia or in other country that maybe it will be successful? Yeah, you know, I think the Musrembang is not to succeed in Indonesia because sometimes it's more like top-down planning, not bottom up. The bottom up is very, very small impact, I think. Maybe that's, look, I hope you understand my question.
I will start with the first one, and I'll try to answer the second, but I'm happy to pick up on that again. So the first one, in terms of which scale to work, right? Or that co-planning, co-design would be more suitable to, right? Well, normally we're talking about the level of communities, really just going and understanding the people who are actually at the forefront of the problems, right? So if you talk, it depends on kind of problem you're talking about, but usually it's really about understanding even the definition of what is a problem, right? That you can then design a solution for, needs to come from the people who are living through that. Look, there's this thing about what is a social problem, right? And often that's determined by the people who are suffering the consequences, the people who are living in poverty, the people who are living in disease, the people who are suffering the consequences. If they say they are not happy, that they are in pain or they are suffering, we have to believe that, right? And again, we can work with them to understand the degree of the problem and what the actual scope of the problem. But that's often the definition of a problem. And that often comes from the very bottom layer, right? So we go to try to get that understanding first. Now, solutions or effective measures may come from upper layers, right? And that often can also be an arena for co-design, co-planning, but in a different scale. Like when we're talking, the more you go up the chain, especially in political chain, like you're talking to the city managers or province managers, the federal government, right? Like you're talking about different scales of power and access to resources. And again, different countries work different ways. Like in Australia, the federal government can do certain things. The state or province governments can do other things that the federal government cannot do by law, right? So it's not necessarily that the federal government can do more. So you go to the people who can actually help to provide resources for a solution of your problem. But the understanding about what the problem actually is comes from direct interaction with the people going through the problem. Like if you're talking about policy, then if the problem is about policy, you may go talk directly to government, directly to policymakers, and then it depends on which layer of government the policy is determined. And you'll be working with them, like because it's a policy problem. But often to inform policy, you need to understand those who are going to be affected by the policy. So you need to go down and talk to the communities again, right? So it's often like navigating the system at different points in time. You go and talk to different people to understand the problem that you are currently dealing with, because they are related. And it comes back to the question about relationality. Like there's no point only going to one layer, like one level, without ignoring the other level, because they are intrinsically connected. Like you can't only talk to communities. You can only do so much bottom up. At certain point, you don't have access to resources. You don't have permission to do things. So you need to engage government. And you cannot only talk to government, because again, there are people who are going to be being affected by the decisions that the government make, and you need to talk to them as well. Precisely because of the relationality which is intrinsic to the system, which is society. You need to move as a designer, move along the system and talking to different groups at different times if you really want to come up with a more comprehensive solution. Now, sometimes you can do that, sometimes you can't, but ideally that would be the approach, like to involve everyone in the conversation somehow. Not together at the same time, but at different points throughout the process. Now, I think the second question was about if you have bodies, specific bodies that are responsible for planning. Is that correct?
Like how we can do co-planning in what we call the planning, the uh, is there an experience in Australia, or that we have to put it in spatial planning who role by the government?
Um, not to the level that I feel there could be, right? So there is a lot of consultation in Australia and like what we call town halls, when people are invited to come and express their opinions about certain proposals by the government, but they are not necessarily involved in the design. But I have seen some, especially when there are community initiatives, like let's say about multiculturalism, right? So you have people from different cultures living in Australia. Australia is a very multicultural country. So there are often committees within the local government, so the lower level of government, um, to involve different residents of a community and having them come together as representatives of their culture, so there can be a dialogue and then about understanding the needs of the different communities, and therefore the government can then act in response to those needs in consultation and in collaboration with members of the community, so representatives of different groups within the community. That usually happens. I have seen that happening more and more in Australia, but at the very bottom level of government, right? It usually doesn't scale as well at the moment. There are examples from other countries. I know one from Brazil even about participatory budgeting, right? So I mean, getting members of the community, the government invites representatives from the community to decide how the money is going to be distributed for different initiatives for the community, and the residents are responsible for um, they're responsible for keeping the decisions with the community, right? So they participate in the community and they become accountable for the community in terms of what the decisions were made. And that has been quite successful. I mean, it's not, again, not everywhere, but there has been some examples that have worked quite well in that regard in Brazil.
Okay. Thank you, Luke. To Ida, there's no sound.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
already in the end of this lecture. So we were now going to give you this appreciation for sharing the expertise and to all participate for your active engagement. Is
Yeah,
the certificate already there, Pak Heru? You may share the certificate, and probably can we take a picture first for all of
of
us?
course, yes.
Everyone, open your camera. So I think Pak Didi or someone will take screenshot. Come, everyone, join. Okay, I think most of the students also.
Good to see everyone.
Yeah, it's not everyone. Wait, I
Thanks for
change
coming.
the gallery first. Okay. There are 66 up until now. Okay.
Amazing.
1, 2, 3. Okay. Wait. Okay. I think already. Probably anyone also. So I guess I don't have to take the summary already. You take the key takes away. It's include all of them, but I think I want to add some. This social responsive design must be rooted in participatory methodologies that privilege community expertise, collaborative sense making, and iterative co-production by integrating, for example, such as the theory of change and social in canvas, and designer can more rigorously link community-driven insight to strategic pathways for long-term social impact. So the role of social designer to act as an expert citizen, short storyteller, and translator who facilitate equitable future through shared authorship and contextually grounded innovation. I think that's from me. So, do you want some pantun, Look? I
Do-
think
do-
you always have this pantun for closing. So, mentari sore mulai meredup, langit jingga
Okay.
indah warnanya. Terima kasih atas diskusi yang hidup. Semoga bermanfaat bagi kita semua. The translation will be like, the afternoon sun begins to fade. The sky is beautiful orange color. Thank you for lively discussion. Hopefully it will be useful for all of us. So once again, thank you, Dr.
Yep.
Luke Espanyol, for the sharing experience, and all the participants, the lecturer, the students, for your active engagement. If you want to receive your certificate, don't forget to fill the registration. Okay, it's there already.
Can I just express again, thank you everyone for coming, for attending the
yeah, yeah.
lecture, everyone on YouTube as well. Thank you for the questions, the really thought-provoking and important questions. I hope that was interesting to you. And if you want to reach out to me in the future, if you have any other questions, feel free to email me at any time or connect to me on LinkedIn. I'll be very happy to continue the conversation with you. So thank you so much again. Terima kasih banyak semuanya. And I'm happy to come back at any time.
Okay, thank you.
Don't forget kapan-kapan.
Kapan-kapan.
Kapan-kapan you singing again with us later.
Next time I'll come with my
Kapan-kapan.
Persib jersey.
Okay, this is the certificate for Dr. Luke Espanyol. Thank you very much. Daddy
Thank
will
you very
send you
much.
directly to your email.
Thank you
Once
very
again,
much.
thank you. I will be closing this lecture. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a good day and great day for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Luke.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Bu Ida. Bye-bye, Pak Daddy. See you next time.
See you again. See you again.
See you soon.
Kapan-kapan.
Kapan-kapan. Bye-bye.
Kapan-kapan. Oke, terima kasih semuanya. Jangan lupa isi absen dan sertifikat ya.
Baik, Bu.
Terima kasih, Bu.